So my name is Catherine Holmes. I'm a Registrar in Emergency Medicine trainee in Yorkshire, working in Leeds at the moment. I'm also a Simulation Fellow. So this post essentially is a bit of a summary of our assessment of what we're doing at the moment. So when I started the job, there's already an embedded in-situ programme in Leeds. So we have 2 big teaching hospitals, and once a week we run a session. So we run 2 sessions a week, one in each hospital. And we've got a few different aims and objectives with them, so they're all slightly different. So a lot of them are aimed at education, so they're predominantly aimed at sort of the more junior doctors and nurses. The other thing we've helped is to introduce new guidelines. So we had a new rapid sequence induction guideline and checklist introduced, so we use simulation as a way of introducing and raising awareness of that. And we've also started with trying to introduce research and practical skills. So our centre does a Roboa trial, which is it's a practical skill that our vascular surgeons do essentially. But it was something that it's something that happens in a life-threatening event, and actually there's a lot of people around. So what we were aiming to do is look at the human factors around that. So predominantly our aims are usually sort of aimed at the sort of human factors side of things, but also sort of looking at some of the clinical skills. Essentially what we found, so we do a pre-brief, we do the simulation session, and we do a debrief afterwards. It's a reasonably standard setup. And after the debrief, we give all our participants a questionnaire to find out what they've learned, what they've developed, and if there's any sort of feedback for us and what they want us to do in the future, essentially. So the table that you can see up there essentially just summarises the scores. So the maximum score was 10, and you can see we've got positive feedback for all of them. Looking at it in a little bit more detail, the one we're sort of the lowest mark on was sort of leadership skills. I think a little bit of that is probably related to how we phrased the question on the feedback form, actually. I suspect if we'd said ask them about their awareness of leadership skills rather than improving their own leadership skills, that might have changed. Also, usually you have one leader in a scenario, so if we're doing a big trauma scenario with 10 participants, you're only going to actually have one leader, and a lot of the time the perception is that if you're not leading, you can't improve your leadership skills. Our other thoughts were potentially improving that in the debrief, so actually talking a bit more around that. The other thing that I find interesting, I don't know how many of you have ever done a lot of in-situ sim before. So most of the time it's participants that aren't sort of pre-warned. They get a bit of a, we're doing simulation, can you come and take part? And I get a very wide variation of answers to that, from no, I'm never going near it, to yeah, that's great. And it's interesting to find out the ones that give you a sort of a more negative answer to start with. I've never had anyone at the end say, I regret doing that. They always learn stuff, and you can see our valuable tool in training at the bottom is the highest score on there, so 9.5 out of 10. So even the ones, the reluctant participants are learning, and actually after the event appreciate what we've been doing with them, which is really good to see. So from a sort of a development point of view from our side of things, I think we're doing loads of good stuff. We've got the in-situ simulation embedded. We've been working with lots of different teams. Moving forwards, there's bits to tweak, but I think at the moment we're working with our blood bank, trying to get some scenarios set up there, and working with different teams, so the anaesthetists, the trauma teams, and making sure that all stays involved. And actually from a nursing point of view, we've introduced a nursing simulation specifically for assessment, because there was a sort of a gap identified, and actually I'm working with a lot of our nursing staff to get them to keep pushing that forwards, and sort of help with the feedback and things there. I think if you look at the other graph down there about the participants as well, we get a lot of nurses, and we get a lot of senior doctors. I think that's a little bit weighted by our trauma scenarios that have more people and are usually more senior, but potentially targeting a little bit more towards the junior doctors and some of the senior nurses, I think would be helpful, because a lot of the senior nurses have a little bit of a perception of, oh, it's for the juniors to do, and actually I think everybody learns, and actually what works really well is when you've got a junior and a senior colleague working together, which is exactly how it would be in real life. So I very much encourage them to phone their boss if they need it in the simulation. So continuing with that work. Time's run.